Hello, everybody. It is Friday, September 30th, and you are watching the Reach Films podcast. My name is Jeff Fagan, and today we're talking about some of the camera news, especially the FX30 from Sony. And I came out with a video this week, and I received tons of questions, comments, not only in that video, but also on Instagram about why I'm switching over to the FX30, if I'm selling my Canon cameras, and I figured I would do a separate video, and I do it live just to make sure everything's still working, since I don't do live often on this channel that much, although I'll explain later. I've been doing it a lot for other channels. And so today we're going to go over why, again, I am switching over to the FX3, and also talk about the future of my Canon RF cameras, other than the Komodo. I will let you know the Komodo is staying. So first of all, I want to let you all know, why am I purchasing the Sony FX30? Because it's, lately I just got the Canon R7 in a few months ago, and it's a very solid camera. Solved a lot of issues I had, especially with a lot of the Super 35 lenses that I've been using over the past 5 years. So it really made me not have to buy any lenses for the R7. But the FX3 is also a Super 35 APS-C sensor. So a lot of those benefits I had with going to the R7, as long as I have an adapter from E-mount to EF mount, a lot of those Super 35 lenses are going to work just as well with the Sony camera. So anyways, first thing's going to be first. So a little over a year ago, I was working for Grant Cardone, and it's crazy. It's about to be a year now since I left. And at Grant Cardone, we were using the Sony FX3 cameras. The Sony FX3s were amazing. Now, a little bit of backstory even before then. Till then, my only camera with autofocus was the RED Komodo. I was primarily shooting on the Komodo and Blackmagic pocket cameras, the 4K and the 6K. And those cameras just don't have autofocus in them. I never saw a need for autofocus until that point. So when I got to Cardone and we were shooting a lot of events, our main cameras were the Sony FX3s. And immediately I could just tell the autofocus was superb. The colors on the camera were superb. And for shooting things like events that, having really great autofocus will absolutely help, it changed my whole perspective on what I needed to film events or weddings or live streams, really anything that could really benefit from having autofocus. Because until then, I came from the mindset of you don't use autofocus. Autofocus doesn't work that well. And for anybody, I think most people who have that perspective haven't used a camera with good autofocus, a good modern camera that's come out in the past few years with good autofocus. So that camera completely changed my mind. We got some comments in here. Hi, Saturday morning in New Zealand. Hey, Kiwi, thank you for watching, buddy. And we got Crypto Fitness and Gaming. Hey, how you doing? I'm just going to go back and talk to you guys in a bit. If you guys have any questions, by the way, this is a live stream. This is the video version of the podcast. Make sure to put them in the comments, and when I kind of get through everything today, I will get to them at the end of the video. So just to go back into this, so I was filming at Cardone. We were using the FX3s, and when I left Cardone, one of the things I knew right off the bat was I need to move into this mirrorless realm, especially for a lot of clients that couldn't really afford to use the Komodo, and I would be using the Blackmagics with those clients. And a lot of that work would benefit from having a camera with autofocus. So the first thing is going to be, why did I go with Canon when I left Cardone if I liked the FX3 so much? And first, it's going to be that my only lenses at the time in December of 2021 my only full frame lenses were RF lenses, because my RED Komodo was an RF camera, and I had some lenses specifically for the Komodo that I couldn't use with my Blackmagic cameras, but they were all full frame because there were no crop censored cameras for Canon RF at the time other than the C70. So I had some RF lenses. So that's number one. Number two, there was no A7 IV. There were rumors of it at the time, but it wasn't around. It wasn't announced yet. So I wanted a camera under 3,000, especially as a secondary camera to my Komodo for a lot of these smaller gigs. I didn't necessarily want to go get an R5. I didn't need the RAW since I have the RED Komodo. I also didn't want to stretch and get the A7S III or the FX3 just because I felt like I didn't need the full frame cameras. even though I ended up going with the R6, which is full frame. But I also just couldn't justify spending that kind of money at the time when I did have the Komodo as my primary camera. Again, this was going to be a secondary camera for me. So I ended up going with the Canon R6 because it was $2,500. It was full frame and it shot 10-bit video. And it gave me what I needed with the lenses I had already. But what I soon realized owning the R6 was in order to use it on professional gigs, I actually couldn't use the lenses I had, and I had to go the EF lens route just because, as some of you may know, and this is going to be a pattern throughout today's video, a lot of the really professional RF lenses are very expensive. So I ended up getting a Sigma 24-70 EF that I could use on my R6. I could use it on my Komodo, and now that you're probably thinking about it, yeah, I can use it on this FX30 that's coming on in. So that was the big thing. I did not want to spend over $3,000 on a secondary camera. It just didn't make sense for me at the time. Now, the FX30, it has some really great codec and log options. So one of the things Canon did, especially going to the R6, which we are filming on right now, the codecs in that camera are not bad, but they're not Canon's highest end codecs that they offer for 10-bit video. Especially, they don't have the all-eye codecs in the R6. They also don't have the all-eye codecs in the R7, which is a little upsetting. It kind of makes sense because this is $1,500, but they just did not put those codecs in. Now, one of the things that you'd think is, well, why don't you just go get an external recorder for these cameras? And the problem is, for whatever reason, when you use an external recorder with these modern Canon mirrorless cameras and you want to shoot in C-Log3, Cinema Gamut, you want to have the best image quality you can, there are issues with the image. I have a video on it that I'll link after this live stream is done that goes into it a lot more, but essentially you can't use a recorder to properly get around the image quality issues on these cameras unless you're shooting with something that will shoot raw, give you raw externally. And the R6 and the R7 don't let you shoot raw externally. That's actually another bonus of the FX30, which we'll get to in a bit. But so the FX30 has great internal codec options, and it's got great log options. The next part is they give you pretty much all of the log you would need to match the FX30 to Sony's higher end cinema cameras. I'm not going to tell you and sit here and be like, you're going to get the same quality as the Sony Venice, because that's just not the case. However, you get the tools in the camera to be able to match this camera up if you're using it with a Sony Venice or an FX6, an FX9, an FX3, Sony A7S III. You have the codecs to match them up. And in the lower end Canon cameras like the R5, R6, R7, you only get C-Log3. So if you want to match your camera to any of those cameras in that ecosystem, you can using C-Log3. And I've routinely used my R7 and the R6 a lot, and they match really well using C-Log3. However, the big caveat is in Canon, C-Log2 is actually the better quality codec, or sorry, the better quality log. So if you don't have an R5 or an R5C or a C70, pretty much any camera besides the C70 that can shoot RAW, you don't have access to shoot in C-Log2, which is Canon's premium image quality. So that's yet another reason why I'm looking at the FX30, because I just can't get that premium image quality in these cameras. Third-party lens options. So one of the things that I didn't really care about in the beginning was third-party lens options because, you know, I was using EF lenses anyways. So for the first few months with the R6, I didn't really see the necessity of why it was a big deal to not have RF lenses because, you know, I had my 24-70, I had my 70-200, even on the R7, I used my 18-35, I used my 50-100, the TOKINA 11-16. All of those are third-party lenses using an EF to RF adapter. But after using these cameras for a while, and you're going to see some of my videos coming out in the next few weeks where I use the R6 and the R7 in very small configurations. You can only get these cameras extremely small if you're using the native lens mount lenses. So if you're using RF lenses with the R6 and R7, you can get an extremely small camera package. Same as with Sony. If you use some Sony E-mount prime lenses, you can get an extremely small and compact setup. The issue is, with Sony, you can get lenses from companies like Sigma in their 16mm contemporary lens for the E-mount, which is only for APS-C cameras. It's really great. The price is really great. The image quality is really great, and it's really small. So you can vlog or do talking head setups or live streams with that setup and keep a super small and compact camera rig. Whereas on the R7, this is really about as small as I've been able to get the camera for proper live streaming rigs or talking head setups that I do for Jazz Is, for me personally, for some of my client work. This is the smallest I've been able to get it, and the quality is great, don't get me wrong. But it's pretty big, and you know, in some situations, depending on what you're shooting, you may need a smaller setup, and I'm just not going to get that with this camera. I do have RF lenses like this Sigma 16mm. Let's see if the autofocus catches it. There we go. So I have the 16mm. I'm actually doing a review on this lens. It's part of the reason why I'm super sunburnt today. I was working on the review for the lens, and it ended up being such a nice day. I stayed out for a while, and my buddy Diego came out, and we did some surfing stuff, and it was I got sunburned, but we got some great footage today. And using this lens to vlog makes sense, but not with a camera like the R7. It makes sense with a camera like the R6 because of how cropped in it is at 16mm on the R7. So there's some trade-offs. Third-party lens options, huge. There's just so many companies making third-party lenses for the Sony E-mount because it's open. And I think the problem with Canon is they're telling companies like Viltrox you can't make lenses, and it makes sense. It seems like Viltrox was trying to skirt their IP, but Canon's also not coming out and telling us, hey, we're not going to allow third-party lenses. They're just keeping quiet because I think it's one of those situations where if they keep quiet, a lot of us just speculate, but we don't 100% know what's going on. Or if they say something and say, no, we're not going to allow third-party lenses, it actually makes them the bad guy and will give them negative press. So I don't think they're going to say anything about it, but it's very clear that they're not going to be letting third-party lenses come into play. And that's part of the reason why I want the FX30 as a secondary camera in my ecosystem. So the next is going to be, the camera is very modular, like my RED Komodo. And I like that because you don't necessarily have to get a cage for the FX3, which makes it a little bit lighter. As you can imagine, I've got a cage here on my R7. I actually don't have a cage on the R6 because I'm trying to keep it as light as possible for vlogging right now. But I do use a cage when I need it in cinema configurations, and like I said, this R7 does not leave this cage, and that's how I get these things to be somewhat modular. But the FX3 is in a cube configuration. It's just so modular as it is, and it's got 1/4-inch mounting threads throughout the body. You don't really need a cage for that camera. And it being modular and actually not having batteries stick out the back like I do on the Komodo, it does help. So that is a really big deal with it being modular. The next is going to be a full-size HDMI. With these Canon cameras, they use it. There's actually the first camera I've had in a while that I went backwards from having full-size HDMI on the pocket cameras to these use micro HDMI. I don't like using micro HDMI because I'll tell you, I end up having to convert it to regular size anyways. Even right now, I have an HDMI coming out of my capture card that goes into the R6. But before I have the HDMI going into the R6, I have a small little converter that's converting it into micro HDMI. But also, the layout on the R6 is a whole nother story. I'll put a link to my I'll put a link in the description to my R6 review because I talk about how the HDMI and the USB-C layout on this camera are just not the best. It's actually something they did fix on the Canon R7, but I can see why they didn't go full-size HDMI, but it helps when you're doing a lot of broadcasting, which leads me to the next reason I'm getting the FX3. Live streaming over USB. So some of the Canon cameras will let you live stream over USB. Some of the Sony cameras will let you live stream over USB too. However, at least with the Canon cameras and the Sony camera that I have experience with, The quality of the live stream over the USB just hasn't been that great. It's why, even though I'm using the R6 right now, I'm going out of the HDMI and using a capture card. You get like less than a 720p image when all is said and done when using the USB, at least the USB-C, at least with the R6. And it's just crummy, to say the least. The image quality just wasn't that great. And so I've just never used these cameras out of the USB-C in order to do that. So I'm always bringing a capture card, which luckily my capture card's small, but it's just another thing you have to bring. Whereas it seems, at least with the FX3, it looked like the image quality out of the USB-C for live streaming was better. So I can't wait to test out this new camera, the FX30, because I would imagine that it would at least be as good as the FX3 for live streaming. We're only trying to get a 1080p signal here. So it's not like a crazy thing that we're asking for, but it's interesting how crummy the signal is on the USB-C on the R6. Now on the R7, they actually never even enabled USB streaming on this camera. Don't know if they will, but whenever I have live streamed with this camera, I've always done it out of the HDMI using a capture card. So live streaming is something that I will be doing a lot with the FX30, and I will be using the USB-C if the quality is close to or as good as using the HDMI. So the question becomes, am I selling my RF cameras? I'm talking about this FX3 so much. What am I going to be doing with them? And the question is, I'm not going to sell all of them. Most of my gigs, I have a 2-camera setup, and for a little bit I was doing the Komodo. Well, before I got the RF cameras, I was using 2 Blackmagic cameras for all of those 2-camera setups. Occasionally I would use the Komodo and the 6K. Then when I got the R6, I went to using the Komodo and the R6. And then when I got to the R7, I started using the R6 and the R7, and obviously matching those cameras were a lot easier than matching the cameras from the different brands. Then I got a plugin called Cinematch from Film Convert, and that literally changed the way I do things, especially using multiple camera brands. Now, I got a lot of pushback when I pushed Cinematch because they did send me the plugin for free, but they didn't pay me anything to talk about the plugin. And honestly, when I first got it, I was telling people, I really like it, but it wasn't ready yet when I first got it. And then about a year later, they came out with tons more camera profiles. And the biggest thing here is they came out with camera profiles that were not in DaVinci to do color transforms, And it's one of the reasons why I can't wait to see what they do with the GoPro 11. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but this is the podcast. Now that the GoPro 11 has 10-bit, you can take something like Cinematch once they get the GoPro profile in there, and you can match it to other cameras with a few clicks of a button. And with Cinematch, they even promote that, once you do the transform, you can go use your LUTs. Like, let's say you're trying to match the FX3 or let's say the GoPro to the FX3, and you have FX3 LUTs you want to use, you could potentially put that LUT on Cinematch and get going. I actually do that a lot. I match a lot of my cameras to my old pocket cameras, as I had tons of custom LUTs created for those, and they always look amazing, and they always look very close from each camera from different brands. I will say they never look exactly the same, but they look close enough to where when you're cutting between the cameras, you can't really notice the small differences. So where I'm getting at with this is I'm only going to be selling one of my Canon cameras, and I don't know which one it's going to be yet. I have to have the FX30 in hand before I can make that decision. I can't just prematurely say, you know what, I'm going to go sell my R6 because I don't like how it starts overheating when I use it for live streaming over an hour. And that is actually truth. I've been using this to live stream a lot, especially on the Jazz channel. And when I hit an hour on this camera, I start getting the, and I'm not even recording, but I start getting the overheat warnings. So the R6 didn't get a lot of the fixes that the R5 did when it comes to overheating, which is kind of upsetting. But anyways, I digress. I don't know which one I'm going to sell. It's either going to be the R6 or the R7. I'm probably leaning towards the R6 though, only because of the overheating issues. But if it didn't have those overheating issues, I would probably sell the R7, as the FX30 obviously is very similar to what the R7 offers, as far as it's got a similar sensor size, similar functionality to what I think a lot of R7 users, or a lot of Canon users, would buy the R7 for, which is having a super or relatively cheap camera that matches the other cameras in your ecosystem. That being said, I want to keep the RF cameras, or at least one of my RF cameras from Canon, and also have the Sony, because occasionally I get requests from producers that want me to come on a project, and they'll give me a kit fee if I have a camera that matches within their ecosystem. So a lot of the times, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but a lot of the times they come to me and they're filming on Sony. They're filming with an FX6, an FX9, and they want a secondary camera, and they'll bring me on as a camera op. However, they'll give me a higher kit fee if I have a camera that's a Sony camera that matches with their ecosystem. But I've never really been able to offer that. So in those situations, it's basically been, I can either bring the Komodo or I just come as a camera op, because a lot of them don't really care about the Canon cameras, and it's not because they hate on the Canon cameras. It's just a lot more work for them in post to match the cameras, but they're willing to do the work for the RED camera. That being said, the RED camera is, even the Komodo, way more expensive than even an FX30, even an FX3 once it's all rigged up. So I don't like doing that, because most of the time, even though they'll take the RED, they may not give me the exact rate I would have wanted, which is why I don't offer it, just because I rather not put the hours on the Komodo at that point. But there have been a few gigs that I have, and we've had to kind of negotiate back and forth. So that being said, having an FX30 kind of takes that all out of the equation, because if someone comes to me and they want a Canon camera, well, I can offer them an R7 as a secondary camera. If they're coming to me and they need a Sony camera, I can offer the FX30 as a secondary camera. So it kind of comes down to versatility as a camera owner-operator, and being able to kind of offer everyone those specific cameras for their productions and make a little bit more money. It makes a lot more business sense too, and that's kind of why when I saw the price of the FX6, I jumped on it. I just knew it was something that made sense for me, because I'm not, as much as I'd like to have a massive production company and be running all of these productions not only as a DP but as a producer or a director or whatever it may be, most of the time I'm being hired as a freelancer just to either camera op or DP, and I'm working for other production companies. So it's always going to kind of be whatever that production company wants, unless they give me the power as the DP to choose all the cameras. And if I have an unlimited budget, I may go all RED or whatever. But most of the time that doesn't happen. So I'm kind of, I kind of have to listen to what they want, especially sometimes if an editor has been with them for many years. The editor may have most of their experience maybe with a RED camera, or most of their experience, because they've been doing it for a few years now, maybe with the Sony cameras or the Canon cameras. It's kind of been a different animal from company to company that I go to. So that being said, I wanted to make this a separate video as a podcast episode to kind of explain why I'm getting the FX30, especially when I've been Canon for at least all of 2022. And you know, even with the Komodo since 2020, I've had an RF camera for over 2 years now. So it's been an interesting changeover. So now I'm going to go over to your questions, and I'm sorry, I know it's populated a lot in chat, and I just wanted to kind of knock out this whole video. So I'm going to start from the beginning. So Crypto Fitness and Gaming, he has an Atomos Ninja V, but your R6 overheats. And yes, I've heard that can happen, but I actually just, once I did that video and I discussed how, essentially the short of it is, it's kind of being blocked by this softbox right here. But if you see this blue light a little bit on the corner, the issue I was having with the Atomos Ninja V was on any of my Canon cameras, shooting in cinema gamut, all of those blue lights would be purple. Now it's not fixable. It's just an issue where some people are blaming Atomos. Really, I think it's a Canon issue that they just can't output the right colors for cinema gamut in C-Log 3. the FX30, the codecs, the bitrate. So I don't have the bitrate on me. I'll pull it up, but essentially they have the all-eye codec in the FX30, which is really big, especially if you're shooting objects or you're shooting shots that have just a crazy amount of movement in them. You want to be shooting with all-eye. So let's pull up the FX30 bitrate. Going to, in the meantime, hit the like button, you beautiful people. Yeah, if you guys are watching, make sure to hit that like button. It definitely does help. I know I haven't done a lot of live streams lately. This has probably been my first live stream on the Reach Films channel in about a year. But typically I've just been doing them for the Jazz Is channel. Lens. Yes, lens selection is for, I say it in all my videos, your lens selection most likely for most people will dictate what camera system you go with, unless you're willing to completely change your lenses. Kiwi, there's a lot of talk on YouTube about the third-party Canon lenses, but a question I have is how much do YouTubers represent Canon's massive non-commercial user base who might be perfectly happy? And Kiwi, I'm going to tell you right now, I completely agree with you. And I said this to someone on my channel the other day. And it's the fact that if we all stopped buying Canon cameras today, I don't really think Canon would do anything unless for whatever reason the kind of filmmakers or content creators that are using Canon cameras that care about third-party lenses, unless it's such a huge majority of us that it would really hurt their bottom line, I don't think they care. So I think you're right. I think the biggest user base of these of the Canon RF cameras are happy with what they're using. That being said, I think some of the ones, when it comes to crop censored cameras like the R7, I think there definitely is a much larger base of users that would want third-party lenses. However, Canon looks at cameras like the R7 as gateway cameras, looking to take, users who may have never been in the Canon ecosystem before and switch them to full frame at some point. So that's part of the reason I think why you don't even see that many APS-C Canon RF lenses right now. It's part of the reason why I think Canon abandoned the EFM line. They want people eventually to come to Canon and get full frame. So I agree with you. I think some people are perfectly happy with the Canon lenses. With the cheaper RF primes and say the 24 to 105. Yeah, and I mean, I have not all of the, actually, I only have two of the RF primes. So I have the 16 mil and I have the 35 mil, which I'm actually being filmed on right now. Extremely happy with the 35 mil. I think the image quality on that, on the R6, on the R7, and the Komodo, outstanding for the price. We'll talk about this 16 mil in my video coming up, but tell you, very selective use, unless you're just shooting JPEG or whatever. I've had an interesting experience with this 16 mil. I had a lot of high hopes for it. It's still a very decent lens, but I'll go over that in my video soon. I don't want to give up too much. Then the 24 to 105, I have that one, very solid. However, the image quality of the 24 to 105 doesn't even compare to Sigma's 24 to 70 art lens. So I got the 24 to 105 when I first got the Canon R7. I'm sorry, when I first got the R6, I bought a 24 to 105 because I didn't have that many full frame lenses, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. However, I just did not like the image quality of it compared to what I saw on the 24 to 70. It was like I bought the 24 to 105, I think like a few days after I bought the R6. And then less than a month later, I went and bought a 24 to 70 because I needed to use it for a doc. And I just did not find for video the image quality to be acceptable for that to be my only lens on the dock. I used a 24 to 70 on that dock. It should be coming out soon, actually. I have to put a link on the channel. It was a doc about cryptocurrency and kind of the rise, and it was obviously all before the crash. the crazy crash of cryptocurrency and NFTs and whatnot. But I mean, I was able to run the R6 and the 24-70 entirely. Did not run any other lenses on that documentary, except for I did bring my ZV-1, and I've been wanting to do a video on that for a while, as the ZV-1 was my B cam for this documentary because we had to be very run and gun, and that camera came in and clutch, especially for its for its power zoom ability. ZV-1 came in clutch, and that's one of the things I can't wait to mess around with the FX30 to see how the ZV-1 kind of matches up to it, because I know I don't talk a lot about it on this channel, but I still bring it with me to a lot of places because it's just such it's my GoPro essentially. I have an old GoPro right now. I never upgraded just because I use the ZV-1 for almost everything. I don't really shoot much on the water anymore, so I just love that camera. I hope they come out with a 10-bit version of it soon. It's just insane. Bro, I thought it was only me. It's horrible to live stream. I can use NinjaCast and the quality is still horrible. Yeah, I have not used the NinjaCast, so I couldn't give you any of my like 2 cents on that. But yeah, it's live streaming with these cameras. They can do it. You can do it. We're doing it right now. It's not been my favorite experience, and that was one of the first things when I got rid of all my Blackmagic cameras. I was like, ooh, maybe I should have kept like one. But it is what it is. I used my R6 with my 24-70 2.8 to live stream, and I'm surprised how bad the quality. Yep. Like I said, make sure you use a capture card for sure. Can completely see your professional use case for multiple systems. Makes sense. Yep. I plan to use it to live stream workout videos. All right. Yeah. I mean, if you're planning to use your R6, I think one thing you may actually want to look into if you're going to do workout videos and you're going to try and be on a gimbal. I actually have this unopened here. I got to do a review on it soon, so you guys are getting the first look. But yeah, I've done videos on wireless transmission systems before, and this is Asun's new like quad system that works on SDI and HDMI. And one of the things I want to start messing with, and I believe this one may have audio going through. I have to double check though, so don't quote me on that. But one of the things I've been trying to do is using these wireless transmission systems to send, my HDMI signal wirelessly to a computer, so I can be, live streaming from a gimbal. So I will be doing a review on this soon. It's probably going to be a few weeks. I actually have to go out of town for a wedding that I'm filming next week. So I'll probably get to this second week of October. So stay tuned on that. But I really want to put together a system that I could live stream directly from a gimbal. And especially if I'm only using one camera and not needing to switch things. I have right now the VAXIS 500, which some of you may have heard of. It's okay. I've used it for a TV show and 2 features, and that's it. Reason being, I need to take a sip of water on. So the reason I haven't used it as much as I would have liked to is it has no audio going through from the transmitter to the receiver, at least that I remember. Again, could be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but most of the transmission devices I've used didn't have audio. That was a big negative for me, because obviously if I'm going to do a live stream, I need to have the audio. But on top of that, and this is a pro tip for all of you who don't know this, I need to have the audio coming directly from the camera, because I don't want to have to deal with audio and video sync issues. Because in the beginning, a lot of people are like, oh, why don't you just take the audio from a separate source, put it into your capture card, and that solves your issue. And it doesn't, especially if you have a camera like the R6 or the R7 that does have some latency out of its HDMI. Your audio and video are just not going to sync up. But if you have the audio going directly into your camera, and then you're putting everything out of your HDMI, then your audio is going to sync up, and that solves that issue. So that's what I've been waiting for on that end. I agree with that, though. Coming from the D series, to the 5D series, then to the R series, have the R7 as a second RF body to my R5. Yeah, and that's where these cameras shine. Being a second, so one of the things, I think I kind of touched on it before, but one of the first videos I plan on doing with the FX3 is talking about how between the Canon R7, the FX3, and the RED Komodo, those are three cameras from three different companies that kind of fill the same purpose for all three of those companies. Meaning that the R7 is the cheapest camera available from Canon that shoots C-Log 3 and can be used in conjunction with much higher end Canon cameras. Sony shoots a lot of the Sony picture profiles like S-Cinetone, whatnot, S-Log 3. You can match it with the higher Sony cinema cameras. The RED Komodo, same thing. It's a decent price. A lot of people are buying it as an A-cam because they see the RED name, and it absolutely can be used as an A-cam. However, for the most part, it's meant to be used as an auxiliary camera within the RED ecosystem. So though these three cameras are going to be the three biggest cameras used in those ecosystems. Now, the Blackmagic Pocket also does that for the Blackmagic ecosystem. However, the Pocket 4K is starting to get a little older now. I haven't been mentioning Fuji, and no one said anything. I was kind of waiting to hear about it, but the reason I haven't mentioned Fuji pretty much at all in comparing the FX30 to any of these cameras is, although it's in the same price range, it offers 8K and whatnot, it's not filling the same slot in Fuji's ecosystem as these cameras are filling in their respective camera companies' ecosystem. There is no high-end Fuji, cinema camera that competes with an FX6 or a Komodo or an Alexa or whatever. So it doesn't fit the same bill. Now, if you're like a solo shooter or, you're shooting with all Fuji cameras, it makes sense. But if you're going to add it to like a random ecosystem, you can do it, as I'm probably going to be doing that a decent amount with my FX30, my R7, Komodo, etc. But I will admit, by doing that, creates way more work in post-production. I'm willing to do that on projects that either I'm doing the post-production, the editing, the coloring, whatnot, or I'm giving it to a colorist that is comfortable with that. But like I said earlier, not all editors and colorists, especially editors that color their footage but don't have a lot of experience, not all of them are kosher with that. Not all of them are cool with that, and won't do it, quite frankly. That's why, I was on a production 2 years ago where the editor would only work with a RED camera. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. Slowly, I was able to kind of show him the light and show him how good Blackmagic was at the time, and we were able to work things out. But for the first few things I did, it was RED only. So that was kind of interesting to deal with. By the way, I'm more photocentric than video. What are your thoughts on the new RF24? I'm gonna answer that in two parts. Number one, photocentric than video. That's something I haven't touched on yet that I should have, which is another reason why I'm looking at the FX30. Because with the FX30, it's more video-centric than photo, and normally when you say that, you're like, okay, some of the photo features probably aren't there. Maybe it's like 60-40. Because like a lot of these cameras, they're kind of like 50-50. They've got really good photo features, really good video features. I've actually really, up until I got these cameras, never thought I'd ever use the photo features. I'm pretty much video only. With the FX30, it can take a single photo at a time in JPEG at 26 megapixels, and that's it. So when you hear people saying that the FX30 is a video-centric, video-first camera, it's not just video-centric and video-first. It's really a video-only camera that will let you take a still image. You can't even take it in RAW. So for me, that's not a big deal, but I think there's a lot of users who may be brand new to all of this, and they're looking at something like an R7, they're looking at now the FX30, and they're like, oh, which one should I get? And it's kind of like, well, if you're not like, doing video professionally, and you're gonna take any photos, I mean, you kind of have to go with the R7. If you're going to only do video and like that's it, no matter what, even if you're not doing it professionally, well then the FX30 makes sense. So there's still a place for the R7, which is again why I may end up keeping the R7 instead of the R6. As far as the RF 24mm, the reason I have not picked that up yet, and I don't plan on picking it up at this point, especially with everything going on, the image quality from what I've seen does not match the kind of image quality you see from Canon's 35mm. It has, image stabilization in the lens, which is cool. It's more expensive than the 35mm, which 35mm is my favorite focal length. Just what I've seen, the images haven't been that great, and I haven't had the opportunity to test it on my own, nor am I interested in doing so. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. If it can come my way, I'll take a look at it, but I have no interest in testing it just from what I've seen. However, that being said, I'm saying that a lot today, I think some R7 users, if you really need a prime that matches the 35mm field of view on full frame on this crop camera, I kind of think that's who would get the 24mm at this point, unless you really just need that focal length for whatever reason on full frame. It's hard for me because the problem is it's not quite as sharp as the 35mm, and people are saying that who are using it on full frame cameras. So if that's the case, is it really going to be as sharp on a crop sensor that has a higher pixel density than even something like the R6 has, where people have been saying the quality it's just not as sharp, not as good as a 35? That's kind of, again, that's where I'm thinking. So we'll see. If it comes my way, I'll do a review, but I have no plans at this current point in time. And we got Drew Hall in the house. Drew, what's going on, baby? Drew, for those of you who don't know, is from Craft Show. They do amazing work. Actually, Drew and Jeff are probably the two main reasons I'm even doing YouTube today, just because they did an amazing job, especially on a lot of GH5 content back in the day. So their content is sick. Please do a review. That would be cool. I will as soon as I can. We used a Hollyland and it outperformed our Teradek. Wouldn't doubt it. And I've heard some good stuff about the Hollyland. I've used, which one did I use? I used their first like affordable one that came in the colors. And the reason I don't even remember which one it was is like right off the bat using it, the hot shoe broke. And it was within the return period, and so I just returned it. And I didn't really need it that bad, but I think the one thing that I really liked about it was they were pushing how on the receiver of the Hollyland, you could actually hook up to your computer directly via USB-C and use it as a capture card as well. So that's one of the reasons I got it at the time. It was very solid. I mean, the idea of it was very solid, but I didn't keep it just because of that issue. I decided, having a receiver that has a built-in hot shoe instead of, using something like pretty much most of what I use on my transmitters right now is I use these little NATO rail monitor mounts, and I used to have hot shoe monitor mounts too. I still have a few of them, but I just never use them because of the whole NATO rail monitor mounts. But I like using that, and that situation pushed me to do that. I shoot Sony. I have recently purchased a Komodo. I picked up the Canon speed booster and VND adapter, and I have an EF 18-35. Point is, I'm torn on what mount to invest on glass for Komodo, EF, or PL. Well, I'll tell you right now, if you're looking at Komodo, or if you have a Komodo and you're looking at EF or PL, those are the mounts to get. Those are the right lens mounts to get with Komodo. Reason being, I'm going to spoil a little bit of this 16mm video for you guys. A lot of the Canon RF glass is not only not perfect, that's not even a great explanation. A lot of this glass is made to be fixed in the Canon cameras. So, you shoot wide open on this 16mm f2.8, and you're going to get tons of chromatic aberration, purple fringing. Even on some cameras, you'll even get, like, if you use this on a V-Raptor, you're going to get heavy vignetting in the corners, even though this is a full-frame lens. On Komodo, you don't, but you do get the purple fringing and the chromatic aberrations, like the crazy distortion, all that stuff. But if you use this on a Canon camera, whether it's the R6, R7, R5, and you're shooting compressed video, whether it be 10-bit or 8-bit video, or you're shooting compressed photos, which is basically just JPEG, the distortion on this lens gets fixed a lot. When you're shooting wide open, there's really nowhere near, or if not at all, the chromatic aberration, purple fringing, all that stuff. It all gets fixed via software, whereas on the Komodo it doesn't. And so this lens has made me basically decide to stop buying RF lenses to use with the Komodo. I don't want to say the same experience, but I had a similar experience using the 35mm 1.8, which again we're using right now on the R6. I had a similar experience using that on the Komodo as well. A lot of purple fringing. Really, I would say the biggest thing was purple fringing shooting wide open on Komodo. The flip side is I love that it has image stabilization, because using that with Komodo handheld was great, because it was like, other than the 24 to 105 that I have that's RF, those are my only two stabilized RF lenses. But yeah, I do not like shooting with RF lenses on Komodo. Full disclosure, I have not shot with any of the crazy expensive RF lenses on Komodo. Just the need hasn't come up, so I don't know if they're still just as bad on the higher end lenses, but I can tell you on pretty much any of the budget lenses, not worth it. So yeah, I would definitely stick with EF or PL. And then if your question is whether to go EF or PL, I guess, there's there's a lot of considerations. It's like, do you need autofocus? Are you going to be using it on other cameras that have autofocus? If that's the case, you may want to invest in EF. Are you going to be using it on like other cinema cameras that maybe like use PL? Then maybe go PL. It's really, there's really no like one answer to it. For me, if I was in that situation, I would only go EF, because I do use the autofocus, not really on the Komodo, but obviously on the Canon cameras and on the Sony camera. Adapting specific, I'm just going to tell you this from experience, because I don't know how this is going to be on the FX30, but I know how this is on the FX3 and the A7S3. If you have Sigma's MC11 adapter, it will, if you're using Sigma art lenses, the autofocus is pretty good. So you don't have to worry about that if you're using the Sigma MC11 on the Sony cameras and whatnot. However, not all EF lenses work as great on Sony cameras as the Sigmas do with using the Sigma MC11 adapter. I'm not going to go through a whole list of which ones work great and which ones don't. The only thing I can tell you is my Canon 70-200 that works flawlessly on all of my Canon RF cameras. I can't even get the autofocus to work using a Sigma MC11 adapter on the A7S3. So there's a little bit of, you gotta have to do a little bit of research to see if your lenses would work great on the Sony camera. I know that's a little bit of a tangent for you, but I mean, you already shoot Sony, so it's kind of like, pick the right lens. If you're going to go EF, pick the right lenses that will work to their best on both systems. As I grow in production, I know PL makes more sense. However, electronic can have, yep. If you have any other questions, Kevin, put them in the comments and I'll get to them in a second. But I think I answered your questions other than the speed booster, which I don't know exactly. If you have any specific questions on the speed booster, make sure to put them in there. Thank you for stopping by, Kiwi. I know it's early in the morning for you, so thank you for coming through. I have an EOS R7 and noticed it gets lost when using Ibis on a Rokinon 8mm manual lens. Do you have experience with something similar? So, number one, I haven't. So I only have one manual lens, now I should say two completely manual lenses for the RF lens mount. Now, The way the Ibis works is through the electronics. The electronics feed what focal length your lens is to the camera. So if you don't have a way to input, and I think you do in camera, I just haven't done it yet, but you basically need to be able to input the focal length of the lens you're using in order for Ibis to work properly with these cameras, on manual lenses specifically. Again, on electronic lenses, you never have to worry about that. Your focal length is always going to be there. So I would say take a look. I can't necessarily, if we get time later, I'll take a look since I do have the R7 right here, see if you can input it manually, but I'll have to go grab a manual lens. But I would say look into doing that. The other thing too is be prepared. Super wide lenses in Canon cameras haven't traditionally worked well for Ibis. That was one of the problems I had with this 16mm, not on the R7, but on the R6 until a firmware update came out recently. So that's just a thing with the Canon cameras. They don't seem to like stabilizing at super wide focal lengths. Should I sell my Panasonic S1? Well, I mean, I would never be like, hey, go sell this thing. It's a horrible. I think it really depends on how well the S1 is working for you, because one of the things I will tell you is with me looking at getting the FX30 so quickly after I've purchased the R7, I don't, you know, I've already spoken about that I'm going to have these to suit different productions. But the other thing too is you don't have to change cameras every time the newest and latest camera comes out. One of the things I'll tell you from getting the Komodo and having it before it was officially released, I regretted it in the fact that there weren't a lot of options and third-party options like cages and whatnot available for it when I first got it. There was also like a lot of, you know, connectivity stuff. Now, we're not going to have that with the FX30 because it's essentially, you know, a second generation of the FX3. But I think if the S1 works for you, I would keep it unless you really have a reason to get rid of your S1, because those cameras are solid. I would say my only complaint about them is if I'm going to spend that much on a camera, I want good autofocus. If it's not going to be a cinema camera that we use to follow focus and whatnot, that's my complaint with the Sony, or sorry, with the Lumix full frame cameras. I mean, with Lost, it moves erratically. I don't know what you mean by that, but I'm assuming with Ibis. What did I miss? Are you selling Canon? What's going on, Anson? So, no, I mean, here's the deal. I'm going to sell one of my Canon lenses, or one of my Canon cameras. I'm getting so tired. As you can see, Anson, I don't know if you caught this, but I was working on a review today of my 16mm with the R6, and I'm talking about it with the R7 and the Komodo as well. But because that hurricane came through, we were very fortunate really not to have any effects of it down here other than really bad weather for a few days, and it sucked all the weather with it. And I went out to go film for like an hour. I live pretty close to the beach, and I was really only planning on being gone for that, like, not a long period of time. But the waves were so good that I called my buddy Diego. We had to go surfing a little bit. We never get good surf down here, so I had to take advantage of it, and I got destroyed. So I'm selling one of the Canon RF cameras I have. I don't know at this point in time whether it's going to be the R6 or the R7. Actually, speaking of which one I'm going to do, got to make sure that this thing isn't overheating. All right, we look good. We look good. So one of the issues I've had with the R6 lately is once I hit about an hour with the R6, which we're about at right now, typically I get the overheating icon, but it's not there right now, so I think we are good. But yeah, I don't know which one I'm going to get rid of. It's either going to be the R6 or the R7. Basically, the only thing the R6 has going for it is that it's full frame. Otherwise, I like that the R7 does not overheat. I've had the icon come up, but it's not the same icon as that comes on the R6. The icon is basically letting you know how close you're getting to overheating on the R7, and on the R6 it's like you are about to overheat. You need to either turn the camera off or switch to 1080p right now. And I did not get the R6 to film in 1080p. I also part of the reason the R6, for those of you who don't know, overheats so quickly is unlike the R5 and unlike the R7. In the 4K mode on the R6, it's always shooting in a downscaled, downsampled mode from like 5.2K, and you don't have a choice whether to film in the downsampled mode or a line skip mode like you do on both the R5 and the R7. So that's part of the reason why you can film with those cameras and film in 4K. And if you film in the non-downscaled modes, you will not overheat, or not even overheat nearly as fast as you will in the downscaled modes. And the only time on the R7 I even get overheat warnings, or close to overheating, is because I'm in the downscaled mode. So that's one of the things and reasons I'm considering it being the R6. But lately, I've done, and if you've been catching the channel, if you saw my DJI Avata video, that was kind of one of the first videos I did in this new vlog format, where for certain videos that justify it, I'm doing more of a vlog format, especially if I have to go out in the field to test these cameras. I want to be there and talk about the camera or the tech, whatever we're talking about, while I'm actually there with the tech. And so I've been using the R6 and the 16mm to film a lot of those videos, and it's been working great. And full disclosure, I do not have a lens that works as well on the R7 to do those kinds of videos. I have a TOKINA 11-16, but the autofocus is super slow, definitely not as snappy as the 16mm. And it's also way bigger. So it's like I'm using full frame and the setup is super compact. So it's a lot. I won't know until I get this, I won't know until I get the camera in. The first video I'm going to be doing with the FX30 is, how does it compare to the R6, the R7, and the Komodo as well? Even though the Komodo it's on a different level. It's not fair that I, compare it, but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, it's got a lot of the same functions in Red's ecosystem. So yeah, that's kind of why I did today's video. This is an episode of the Reach Films podcast, so for any of you who are listening to this after the fact, make sure to check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/reachfilms, and you can check out the video podcast, although I'll be completely honest, most of this was me talking today. I did not pull anything up like I have done in the past for this podcast. But I think we are getting at an hour here, guys, so if you have any other questions, make sure to put them in the comments below or the chat. Otherwise, I think I will close this baby out and get some aloe vera in here. I mean, it's crazy. The light kind of hides the sunburn because I'm shooting at 3200 right now. But I mean, I'm sure you guys can notice, especially the sunglasses. I mean, I'm great at roasting myself. I got way too sunburned today. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to end this here. If you guys got knowledge out of today's video, you like what you saw, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel. Thank you for everyone who joined live today. I really appreciate it. This was a really great first live to come back to after... Yeah, I think I basically stopped doing the lives when I started working at Cardone, so it's been over a year. I do plan on bringing back 3D Thursday. I've had way more messages about 3D Thursday over the past almost year since I originally started doing them, about when is 3D Thursday coming back? When is it? And for those of you who didn't know, 3D Thursday, I talk about 3D printed objects for filmmakers that you can't necessarily buy. You really have to 3D print in order to use them. So we will be doing more on that soon. So definitely make sure to hit that subscription bell just so you know when I go live, because those videos are typically live because I'll take some question and answers about the product. So yeah. So until next time, guys, thank you for coming, by the way. Oh, dude, Anson coming in. I didn't even mention this, and Anson saw. Bro, thank you. So I did hit 4,000 subscribers yesterday or the day before. So, that was kind of a new thing. I kind of put out content on this channel It's a lot of them. A lot of the videos are experiments for me to see how. And I know I'm going past. I already signed off, and I keep going. That's the problem with these live streams. But a lot of these videos are experiments for, ideas I have, that things I want to test out. Let's say that a lot of these videos are things I want to test out. But I also come from the background of I never try things for the first time on a client shoot. And I never want to be that person that shows up and tries something on a client shoot and it doesn't work, because then it makes me look like I don't know what I'm doing. So I like to try a lot of, lenses, camera gear, whatnot, and then I do videos about them here on the channel. And it also prepares me for the shoots that I'm going to use them on. So I do, again, want to thank you all for watching the videos. And it's been a long journey. I've been doing YouTube for, giving YouTube a proper go, I should say, for 3 years now. But I've been uploading for like over 10 years. But most of, the stuff for the first 6 years was like a lot of wakeboarding videos that if you like dig deep into the archives, you can find them. So thank you guys again for all joining me today. I really do appreciate it. And make sure to check us out on the Reach Films channel to stay tuned for the next one. So while I'm finding my outro, until next time, guys, thank you for watching, everybody. I'll catch you in the next video.